Hello, everybody. Welcome to another screencast. This one is going to be about Mexico, the beginnings of Mexico, Mexico's history. It's going to be part one. There will be two parts on the beginning of Mexico. Now, you might be wondering a couple things. First of all, where am I recording this from? I don't know if you can tell the background. If any of you go camping, I am in a camper right now in Minnesota. So, coming to you from Minnesota. Um, couldn't wait to get into Mexico and talk about it. So here we go. Now, why do we need to learn the history of Mexico? Our Mexico unit is going to focus on modern Mexico and what's going on there and what Mexicans might or might want to do or might not want to do about their own future. So we're going to get into the Mexican mindset. And to do that, we have to know its past. The same way that to understand America, you have to know America's past. For instance, how would you understand modern gun debates in the United States if you didn't know that we had a Second Amendment written 200 years ago? How would you understand modern religious debates in the United States if you didn't know that 200 years ago we were guaranteed the freedom of religion? So, understanding the past and the history, for us, it's Puritans in Jamestown, Virginia, and knowing the story can inform you about the present. So in Mexico, we're going to look at, let's pull this up. We're going to look at 4 pre-Spanish periods and 3 post-Spanish periods. And part 1 is going to focus on the pre-Spanish periods. The essential questions we will be looking at with the Mexico unit are: what principles should guide the development of Mexico's economy? How should Mexico define its relationship with the United States? How should it define its relationship with the rest of the world? And how should Mexicans address their country's inequality and poverty? So we're looking at modern Mexico, but we got to start with its past. One of the oldest civilizations in Mexico is called the Olmec civilization. It's sometimes considered to be the mother civilization. It starts around 1200 BCE. That's before the Common Era. That's like it used to be called just BC. You have a civilization that develops a complex system of pictographs, kind of like in Egypt where they had the hieroglyphics. The pictographs were the first written language in the Western Hemisphere. They also had very sophisticated ways of cultivating and irrigating their crops. They made a bunch of these large head statues. This is kind of what they're famous for. So you can see there's some very sophisticated stone carving to make something that large and that beautiful. After the Olmecs come the Maya around 150 CE. CE is Common Era. Many still live in Mexico today. Sorry, there's a typo there. It's many still live in Mexico today. The Maya were not just in Mexico, they were in Guatemala, Belize, and southern Mexico, is kind of where they were located. They had a really sophisticated calendar that some people think maybe was used for agriculture. They also had a lot of stone pyramids that they built. Here's a picture of one. It's beautiful. It's great geometric shapes. The architecture is very sophisticated. Not just anybody can go out and build something like this. After the Maya came the Teotihuacanos, and these guys built a major city, their capital city, in the Valley of Mexico, which is where modern Mexico City is. And you can see in this picture all of the architecture in this grand avenue with the buildings along either side of it. Really some sophisticated city design. Up in this top corner, you can see this large pyramid. This is the third largest pyramid in the world. It's called the Pyramid of the Sun. The largest pyramid was also built in Mexico, by the way. Um, they think at its height, this city, Teotihuacano, was built or had about 200,000 people in it. So it would have been bigger than Billings. Billings does not have quite 200,000 people. So it'd be bigger than any city we have in Montana. Um, the next culture we're going to look at is called the Aztec. I'm sure you guys have heard of a lot of these cultures, so we're just kind of, I know I'm just kind of reviewing some of this for you. Here's a picture of a city that the Aztec built. It was their capital, Tenochtitlan. It's in the middle of a lake, also in the Valley of Mexico, where modern Mexico City is. You can see the bridges. There's only 3 or 4 ways to get to the island. When the Spanish show up to conquer the Aztecs, they're amazed by the city, the architecture, the roads, the bridges. Um, the Aztec Empire, let me back it up before we get to the Spanish. The Aztec Empire was the largest empire ever in Mexico. It was about 10 million people. So that's a very large empire. They had a really complex system of administering the military, the social structure, the politics, their religion. So complex government system. When they conquered lands, they wouldn't go in and directly rule them. They would let the other lands continue to rule themselves, but they would force the other people to pay them a tax, or they would call it a tribute. And the other people would have to send in humans who were going to be used in human sacrificial rituals. So there was human sacrifice, and usually it was the Aztec people forcing other groups to send them humans that would then be sacrificed. So it was a way of kind of punishing and oppressing other people. They did have a massive library. This was something the Spanish were also impressed with, as well as all their artwork, the Spanish were impressed with. And you can see this in the journals. A lot of the conquistadors wrote journals after the fact, and they just talk a lot about how amazing the Aztecs were. So that is the end of part one, the early civilizations in Mexico. Keep in mind, our essential questions are more about modern Mexico, and also keep in mind that we got to know the past in order to plan for the future. All right, that's it for now. Make sure you tune in for part two.